There's so much news breaking today that is of prophetic significance. We're not going to be able to talk about it all, but let me just give you the quick rundown. And then we're going to concentrate on one particular area that everyone needs to really be aware of. But you might like to know that the Vatican today has officially recognized the state of Palestine. This has been a real disappointment to the nation of Israel. Nonetheless, it is an official announcement. And then Netanyahu is concerned because nuclear talks that are continuing between Iran and the world community are ongoing exactly when an official of Iran says that God has approved Iran to destroy Israel. So while their officials are saying they have God's approval for destroying Israel, the international community is still negotiating with them. And if those negotiations are concluded, this means Iran has an open path to a nuclear weapon in 10 years from now. Now, 10 years sounds like a long time, but in the history of nations, it's a very, very short time. Also, it's very interesting to note that it appears that Israel's next government will be sworn in tomorrow. That's on Thursday. They were able to get a law passed allowing them to have 2 more cabinet members, 2 more ministers, and that was done, I think, this morning. So tomorrow they will be swearing in the new government. It's going to be very interesting to see how all this happens. Oh, there's a lot of other stories breaking. However, I want to get to our main story that we want to talk about today because it is a very important and critical story, and that's about the International Criminal Court. Now, this is something that's not very well known amongst the public, but it needs to be. It's those things that we don't know much about that wield a lot of power that should concern us in an extra special way. So what I want to do, I want to go back and sort of lay the history of the International Criminal Court. Now, just in case you need to know up front why this is so important, because it has power to arrest you and put you on trial. Now, I'm talking about every human being on earth is subject to the International Criminal Court, or so they claim. Now, let's go back and let's reconstruct the history. Ever since the United Nations was created and a system of world law was put into place, the United Nations has wanted an international criminal court that could arrest even heads of state. So consequently, the World Federalist Association back in the 40s and the 50s, they were big campaigners for the establishment of an international criminal court. Now, the World Federalist Organization, if you want to know what they believe, go to their website. They are dyed-in-the-wool, one-worlders. They do not believe in national governments. They believe that all governments should be subject to a global governance system. Consequently, it's no surprise that they would be in support of an international criminal court that could arrest anyone, anywhere for certain crimes. Well, it was promoted for such a long time by the World Federalist Association. Then it was proposed finally by Bill Clinton at his welcoming speech to the United Nations in 1997. Now, I remember this very well because I was following his speech at the time, understanding how important the speech of the most powerful nation on earth would be at the UN. Well, in his speech, he's just going along and covering many things, and all of a sudden, he dropped the bomb. He said, the time has come for the establishment of an international criminal court. I mean, immediately the World Federalists just went crazy with celebration. I mean, they did not waste any time. They swung into action, and in around April of 1998, just 6 months or so later, they convened a conference to write the charter for this new world court system, the International Criminal Court. Well, they pretty well succeeded, but then they came back together from June the 15th to July the 17th of 1998, And there were 127 nations there, and they all were there to pound out the charter, the Constitution, for this new entity, this new world court, the International Criminal Court. Well, they finally got it all pounded out on July the 17th. A vote was taken. It was approved 120 to 7. 7 nations voted against it. And believe it or not, even though the whole process was begun by President Bill Clinton, yet he was forced to vote against it because Clinton wanted a clause that all cases that went to the International Criminal Court would be approved by the UN Security Council. Well, the United States of America has veto power on the UN Security Council. So we can control who goes on trial, who doesn't go on trial. However, once they developed this big conference, this charter writing conference, the nations of the world took the bit in their own teeth and didn't pay any attention to the United States of America, and they established an independent prosecutor that could go after whoever he wanted to, any place in the world at any time. So that's the reason the United States ended up voting against it. Israel also voted against it. A few other nations voted against it. Nevertheless, a total of 7 against, 124. It was adopted. Okay, now let me pause for a moment to give you one more piece of information that's really important. About 1992, there was a man by the name of Strobe Talbot. He wrote an article for Time magazine called The Birth of the Global Nation. I'll never forget the day I looked on the newsstand and I saw it, and my prophecy radar just went crazy. The birth of the global nation? The Bible prophesies a one world governmental system. And here is an article on Time magazine. Well, I bought the magazine, I read the article, and it was written by Strobe Talbot. And he simply said in this article that in the 21st century, national sovereignty as we have known it will cease to exist. We'll all answer to a single global authority. Well, I looked at that, I thought, who is this Strobe Talbot? Well, I found out pretty quickly because within 1 year, he was brought to the White House by President Clinton, and he served as Deputy Secretary of State of the United States for the next 7 years. Now, that's a very powerful position because the Secretary of State's out here meeting everybody. Somebody's got to be in the background setting policy, setting direction, influencing the Secretary of State, and influencing the President of the United States of America. Well, that was Strobe Talbot. Now, because he was such a believer in world government, he was adamantly in favor of an international court that could enforce the laws of the international world government. So he undoubtedly talked in the ear of President Clinton and was probably very responsible for President Clinton calling for the establishment of an international criminal court. Well, he did call for it. They did have the charter writing. The next step, once the vote was taken, 120 to 7. Oh, by the way, the treaty that established is called the Treaty of Rome. These negotiations were held in Rome. And the Bible teaches that the Holy Roman Empire will be the end-time one world government. And so when we see this very critical piece of legislation given birth to in Rome and actually under the title of the Treaty of Rome, well, that's a big step in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Okay, so now it's time to try to ratify. I cannot tell you how they determined that 60 nations ratification was necessary in order to actually put the court in motion. I mean, after all, there's 193 nations on earth. Most of the time, treaties have to be approved by at least 50% and maybe 2/3. But somehow they decided arbitrarily, I've never been able to find out yet, and I've read a lot about it, they decided that once 60 nations ratified, that was the license for the International Criminal Court to swing into being. Well, they thought it might take 10 years for this to happen, but it didn't. It only took 4 years. By 2002, they had the necessary 60 ratifications. Today, I think they've got 123 nations that have signed on to the World Court. Okay, now still, why do I care? Why should you care? Well, I'm going to talk about the power of this court for a moment. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction to prosecute individuals for the international crimes of 1, genocide, 2, crimes against humanity, 3, war crimes, and 4, crimes of aggression. So anyone that is suspected or accused of committing those crimes can be hauled before the International Criminal Court and can be judged there and maybe sentenced to life in prison, whatever the sentence may be. Now, I can tell what you're still thinking. What's this got to do with me? I've never committed genocide. I've never committed crimes against humanity. I've never committed war crimes. I would not favor a crime of aggression. So why should I care? Well, you should care because most of you have already committed the crime of genocide. You just don't know it. Let's get behind the scenes and let's actually look at the definition of each of these crimes. Now, during this time, when all this was being written back in 1998, much of it was leveled at Israel. And you're going to see that as we work our way through during this program, the different provisions of the International Criminal Court statute. They specifically had Israel and its relationship to the Palestinians in mind. They stacked the deck, if you would. All right, now, we're getting close to our break, so let me take just a moment. I've got wonderful, wonderful news for you today. We've been driving for a while to send an Endtime magazine for the next 2 years to every senator, every congressman, every governor. Well, we're almost there. We've also included the cabinet in this group. We have 42 left to go. We started out with 621. We have 42 left. If you would like to help us finish, $29 will pay for a subscription for the next 2 years. 4 people that would contribute would buy 10 subscriptions for $290. That would finish us out. 42 people at $29, that'll finish us out. Give us a call.